Ray Comfort's method of argument is conducted primarily by using the Socratic method through a line of questions, stacking of inferences, and inevitably ending with the conclusion that a God exists and that it is the Christian God. There is an important distinction that needs to be made, and that is that Ray Comfort is ultimately trying to prove the existence of the Christian God through two completely separate arguments, which have completely separate evidentiary foundations, yet both substantively need to be connected in order for his first argument to be valid. But this is not the case. Here I will break down the process for each phase of his argument and why it is so effective logically, but so ineffective substantively, and why those who engage with him have trouble getting past his argument technique, even if they think they got the upper hand. Ray avoids this issue through a rather complex formula that does not give the person involved the ability to notice the substantive flaws in real time. He does this through a sleight of hand technique that involves the person being tricked into thinking they've won the battle, but the war will ultimately be won by Ray. Ray employs the Socratic method by asking simple questions, of which he knows the person will give him the answer he needs in order to ask another question, and so on. He allows the person to answer the question fully, and even long-windedly, even if the question was quite simple, a tactic that allows for broad generalizations and stretched inferences. Ray Comfort is not going to address the substantive portion of the answer he is given, no matter how accurate the information is. This gives the person answering, no matter how intelligent they are, a false sense of victory when the competition hasn't even ended, and Ray knows this. He gives them a figurative pat on the back for giving such a, quote, good answer, and inevitably making the person feel as if they beat him at his own game. This is not always logically true, although at times it may be substantively, but this is usually irrelevant due to the structure of Ray's argument technique. Objectively, one must give Ray credit due to his ability to trap people into thinking they've won, while inside he is given the answer he needs. Because through their diatribe of an answer to a simple question, no matter how substantively accurate, they've inevitably mentioned something that allows Ray to draw an inference, thus leading to his next question, which was already prepared before he asked the previous question. The previous answer to each question, where the inference is drawn, logically allows him to ask another question based on that inference. This contributes to the continuation of the conversation. Now, Ray's first argument applies logic through analogies and comparative reasoning for the existence of a God, not the Christian God. This is extremely important to remember because he is not ultimately trying to prove the existence of a God, but the Christian God. If this were not true, then he would be attempting to prove the existence of two separate gods. This would mean that there is a God without a religious doctrine and a God with a religious doctrine. Ray's second argument is more substantive, and he uses the Bible as his substantive method of proof for the Christian God, but it would also need to be the substantive method for his first argument, made by using analogies and comparative reasoning for a God. In this argument made by using analogies and comparative reasoning, his questions about the existence of a God are constructed to demonstrate, through comparisons to items constructed by humans, that this God designed all of the natural world with creative intent. This means that all of the natural world was designed in the same creative manner as humans who have designed anything artificial or material, like paintings, TVs, etc. He strongly implies that since we know there is a creative designer behind a painting, that we understand at least generally how that painting was created. We know there was most likely a brush, paint, and someone's arm to complete it. This is because we have either been explained how the process works through education, first-hand experience, or second-hand knowledge which is generally accepted as true due to the explanation of the process substantively. As a side note, ironically, his argument for a God fails substantively because we do know how the trees are created and the collective scientific processes that create them. The only difference here is that his argument is for a conscious design, or in other words, a designer who is self-aware. So this argument through analogies and comparative reasoning holds up only if his second argument is substantive, and he can provide proof comparable to the process of how we understand and believe without question that a painting was creatively designed. This is important because this is the basis for which he accepts that there must be a God, who is a designer, and designs in a manner in which we understand or comprehend that it must have had a designer. Once Ray has finished this line of questions through analogy and comparative reasoning, he then makes a lateral move to prove that the Christian God exists, which is his ultimate goal. If his only goal is to convince you that a God exists, then he has actually proven nothing without the above-mentioned substantive information that is needed to understand how a God creates the tree and everything else. This would require a real large set of information to show how these processes work, due to the wide scope of the natural world, i.e., a tree will be designed through a different process compared with that of a volcano, just like a TV will be designed through a different process compared to that of a car. Ray's argument up to this point is set up to prove the existence of the God in his first argument, where he used analogies and comparative reasoning. It's important to note that the fact that this God is Christian is only relevant if it adds to the substantive proof required to substantiate the first argument. Ray uses the Bible as substantive proof for the God described previously. Therefore, the Bible must necessarily be the information needed to show how this God creates and designs a volcano, a tree, a lake, and so on. But this is not the case. Therefore, he has failed to provide the substantive proof needed to complete his argument for the existence of God, and is simply making a completely separate argument, one for a similar God, but without substance. His first argument is now simply philosophical, not evidentiary or scientific. Now, why is this logically effective? It is because he is not making a substantive argument. It is an argument solely through logic, and things can be both logical and not true, just like things can be illogical and also be true. Ultimately, all that matters when you're trying to prove anything physically exists or has physically constructed something is the substantive, since it is the only thing that can actually have effect on whether it is true or not. Ray Comfort's effectiveness is in large part due to how well he controls the path of his logic, and not whether the logic conforms with the substance needed for actual proof. So next time you have a discussion with somebody like Ray Comfort, or anyone else who uses this style of argument, you have to make sure you only focus on substantive parts, and take control of the conversation when you feel there is a diversion from the substantive. Thank you, and I hope this was informative.